Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. We have all the Saviors of Uldum cards, and now is the time to build some decks and look into what Saviors of Uldum decks will look like. In this video, I'm going to take a look at Druid. First I will take a look at the Druid cards, then I will take a look at the existing archetypes and possible future archetypes, so a little bit of what kind of decks Druid could play in Saviors of Uldum. And looking at the card set that Druid is getting, I have to say that this card set is looking pretty good. There isn't a single completely worthless card in this entire set. Well, Hidden Away is probably the weakest, but still looks like a very interesting set for Druid. First of all, we have the Druid quest, Untapped Potentials. End 4 turns without any unspent mana, and the reward is Osirian Tear, which makes all of your choose one cards to have all of their effects. So obviously, if you're able to complete this quest, then all of your choose one cards become really turbocharged and just incredible cards. If there's a lot of aggro, then completing that quest might be too difficult. But a little bit slower, then quest is very interesting. And what makes this quest really interesting is that all sorts of Druid decks want to run some choose one cards, and you can affect the number of choose one cards in Druid decks a little bit as well. So in theory, you could make a quest variant of almost any Druid deck, although the natural, kind of the pure quest Druid deck would be a mid-range Druid. But any sort of Druid could be built as a quest variant, so there's a lot of deck building challenges ahead. Is the quest variant better than the regular? In which all of decks can you fit in the quest? Very, very interesting. Then there's a great 1-mana spell where the Expedition, discover a choose one card, goes especially well with the quest, but also Druid typically doesn't have too many things to do on turn 1. So overall nice card that can give you some rats or starfalls or minions. Then there's a synergy card for quest decks, the Crystal Merchant, 2 mana 1/4, if you have any unspent mana at the end of your turn, draw a card. Well, drawing cards is good. Quest deck, playing this on 3, all good. Then there's some additional removal in bees. Choose a minion, summon 4 1/1 bees that attack it, and you can set these bees on your own minions as well. So let's say you play an egg deck, so you have an egg on the board, you can set the bees on the egg. They will kill the egg, the bees will stay, the minion summoned by the egg will stay. That's just awesome card. Then there is the Garden Gnome. This is a little bit more limited in scope. 4 mana 2/3 battlecry. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, summon 2 2/2 treants. So that's going to put 6-7 stats on board for 4 mana if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more. This is a token deck card. And if you have a token deck that fulfills the criteria, stuff like running Forest Shade, maybe running Force of Nature, then you could run Garden Gnome in it. Really interesting little buff to treant-based token decks, which have not been that common anymore, because they've been surpassed by the mech-based decks, but Garden Gnome just trying to reverse that trend. Then we have the Anubis Defender, 5 mana 3/5 taunt, costs 0 if you cast a spell that costs 5 or more this turn. So you nourish and you get to drop some 3/5 taunts on the board. I mean, that's really good. Solid card. Then there is the Druid Highlander support card, Elise the Enlightened, 5 mana 5/5 battlecry. If your deck has no duplicates, duplicate your hand. This could go into just about any sort of archetype. It would quite naturally go into some sort of combo archetype where it can duplicate some combo pieces in order to have more than 2 so that you can use them to have lethal, like Malygos and Moonfires. In that sort of combo deck, you don't even have to run a no duplicate deck, because you can play this after your deck is almost empty. Just a nice card, and Druid also, the more redundancy there is, the more uses there can be for Elise, because you could build Highlander variants also of many Druid archetypes. So Druid deck building is going to be really interesting in the Saviors of Uldum, because you can build quest variants, you can build Highlander variants, you can build quest Highlander variants of just about all Druid decks, so choosing what sort of approach you take to these decks will be really interesting. Then there is the Oasis Searcher, 5 mana 3/3 rush, choose one game +2/+2 or summon a copy of this minion. 5 mana for 2 3/3 rush minions isn't terrible. 5 mana for a 5/5 rush minion, kind of here and there. Oasis Searcher and the Hidden Oasis 6 mana spell, choose one, summon a 6/6 Ancient with Taunt or restore 12 health. These cards are mostly for the quest decks. Oasis Searcher is the more playable one in a non-quest deck. Hidden Oasis I don't think is worth playing in a non-quest deck. But because the quest is really powerful, it's completed fairly quickly. These come at the right time when the quest is about to be completed or has just been completed, then even these cards are not useless, they have a place in a very definite archetype. And then there is a great card draw tool, Overflow. 7 mana, restore 5 health to all characters, draw 5 cards. Also incredible support for Lucent Bark Druid. So yeah, the Druid set, I mean, I'm really impressed by the Druid set. There isn't a single completely worthless card in this entire set for this class. There are conditional on the success of the quest, and of course, does the quest succeed? Does the Highlander archetype succeed? We don't know yet. But still, very nice synergies. Key pieces to support some archetypes like Treant tokens, like slower Druid decks overall that want to play stuff like Nourish. New removal piece, lots of stuff that synergizes together and builds decks, yeah. This is a phenomenal set of cards. Especially from a deck building perspective. It's hard to say that any of these would be completely broken. They are obviously, many of them are very strong and offer lots of potential for deck building. So that looks very nice for Druid, which was kind of stuck in the Token Druid and Mech Token Druid archetype, especially late in Rise of Shadows, that this is going to open up the game a little bit. Looking into the Druid archetypes, current Token Druids look something like this. This is the Mech Token Druid. But this is not going to be the only option for Token Druid in Saviors of Uldum. There could be some competition because you can build this in more of an egg style, because you can use stuff like Serpent Egg and you can use bees, pretty powerful things, then buff them up. Yeah, that looks really sweet. You could try to build this again in Treant style, because the Guardian Gnome is going to come support that archetype. So there's definitely competition, and it's hard to say which of these three approaches, mechs, eggs or treants, is going to be the best Token Druid. And it might take a while to find that out, because early in Rise of Shadows, for example, most everyone was playing Treant Token Druid. Then I pioneered the Mech Token Druid, and slowly everyone was converted and Mech Token Druid became the norm. So the one that people gravitate to in the first couple of weeks isn't necessarily the one that ends up being the best at the end of the expansion. I cannot skip Malygos Druid when talking about Druid. Malygos Druid has been going through some hard times. Malygos Druid has not been a top tier deck recently. This was the most popular Malygos Druid list that I could find right now. This sort of trying to live with the Witchwood Grizzly, Archmage Vagot Witching Hour into early game. Then going for that Malygos place later, hoping to high roll a little bit with Geppetto maybe. But Malygos Druid in Saviors of Uldum could look very, very different. First of all, there's of course the option that it could become a quest deck. That's possible. Even if it doesn't, then going with something like Anubis at Defender can just give it a much bigger swing in the mid game, so it doesn't have to rely on this Witchwood Grizzly attempt necessarily anymore. And then there's the option to go with Elise the Enlightened, whether you would make this actually a singleton deck or whether you would just use Elise at the end to double up your Moonfires. There are multiple routes, but I think Malygos Druid is going to change a lot. It's hard to say whether it's still going to be viable. The deck's biggest problem is surviving through the early and mid game. And while there are some tools that help with that, I'm not sure if there are enough. Then there is Heal Druid, the Lucent Bark Druid, also not doing well at all. I theory crafted this sort of build for Lucent Bark Druid, trying to tap into the power of Worthy Expedition, trying to tap into the power of Overflow, which can be a really big deal for the archetype. But we'll see. Lucent Bark Druid is a deck that has some space. So for example in this theorycraft there's an Ooze, there's a couple of Mind Control techs, there's a Big Game Hunter. There is space for a few tech cards in the archetype, and the success of the archetype greatly depends on having exactly the right cards in those slots that help you survive whatever the meta is. The deck has clearly been improved. Beast gives it early removal, where the expedition can be used to find more early removal, or maybe even AoE later, or maybe even minions like another Ancient of Lore, for example, for even more Lucent Bark Resurrects. And Overflow is great, a little bit of healing, Lucent Bark Resurrects, drawing a lot of cards. So the archetype is clearly getting some new tools, but here again, the fundamental problem is the survival in the early game, in order to get to those win conditions later. And whether it now got enough tools or not remains to be seen. Finally, there is Quest Druid. I theory crafted this sort of approach to Quest Druid, a fairly mid-range approach. Sacrificing some of that early tempo on the first turns, then trying to get really big swings in the mid-game, and just overpower the opponent with some great minions. Getting double the effect from stuff like Tending Torrent, stuff like Scenarios, getting those double 5/5 rushes from Oasis Searchers, some Anubisat Defenders for free. The deck clearly has a lot of power in the mid-game. If it can survive until then, well, enough. And this is not the only way to build a Druid deck with the quest. As I mentioned, it's possible to incorporate the quest into just about any archetype. So that's also really interesting to see in which places the quest will eventually find itself. Surviving early on in order to get to the win conditions remains the challenge for Druid, but Druid is getting some tools for that too, because there's the Worthy Expedition, which you can use to try to find some early game cards. Then there's Bees, a good removal spell for the early game, and the Anubisat Defender that you can play for free when you play a little bit more expensive spell. So Druid is getting some tools to buff up exactly its weaknesses, and how effective those tools are, for that we'll need to get to play with them a little. If it's not looking obviously dominant, at the very least Druid is looking extremely interesting, because there's going to be tons of different variants with the quest, without the quest, with LEs, without LEs. Good times to be building decks for Druid.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more.